A lot to get into today, everybody. Michael King, is he going to be traded? As trade talk has resurfaced and made some headlines today. We're also going to talk Dodgers and Kike Hernandez. Should that be their top priority at this point in the offseason? And for Pete Alonso and the Blue Jays, for Alex Bregman and the Astros, is it now or never to get a deal done? Make sure to hit that like if you enjoy your time here, everybody, and leave your comments down below. Let's start off with this Michael King trade talk that, again, has made its way back to the top of the headlines today, as it was brought up in a Athletic article from Ken Rosenthal, where he went through his notes. A primary note was the market, talking about how that has clogged because of the trade market. Luis Castillo, Dylan Cease, and Michael King as pieces that are available via trade. Now, if you're San Diego in the situation you're in right now, after missing out on the Roki Sasaki situation, all of the money they have invested, whether they are happy about it or not, they've got a lot of money invested in this upcoming season. Is this the area we should be focusing on? Dylan Cease, Michael King. And if we are, is trading Michael King a mistake? Now, as he went on to say in this article, at the moment, the Padres and King's camp are not in agreement and are headed toward an arbitration hearing. It can be avoided, but that's where they're at right now. King wants 8.8. The Padres offered 7.3. Even if you get to the 8.8, that's like $5 million less than Dylan Cease. So should it be Dylan Cease that is on the move, or should it be nobody? Look, here's the situation in San Diego. As I talked about a moment ago, they have a lot of money invested in this upcoming season, like it or not. So you have to compete. You're going to have a payroll over $200 million. You have to compete. And the only way you are going to be able to compete in this upcoming season is if you have something that resembles a good pitching staff. You can't, I argue you shouldn't trade either of these pieces. And if you are going to trade one, I think Dylan Cease is the guy that has to go because he has more money attached to his name. In the end, if you're for my San Diego fans, I hope you hold on to both of them. At this point, after the way the Roki Sasaki situation played out, Luis Arraez is the player to trade. Michael King maybe gets them a stronger return because he's cheaper than Dylan Cease. And at this point, maybe Dylan Cease is untradeable because of the dollars and because of the asking price. And maybe Michael King is more appealing. But San Diego, if you had your choice, it's got to be Arraez that you trade because you need King and you need Cease to compete in the upcoming season. Now, if we do go down the road of a Michael King trade, we brought up in our Dylan Cease trade machine a few weeks back 8 teams that I identified as potential trade partners with the San Diego Padres. 8 teams that could send San Diego 2 right now pieces. Now, maybe they don't want right now pieces. Maybe they literally want to erase the money off of the books, whether it's the $8 million that would go to King or the $13 million that's going to Cease. Maybe they don't want anything back but prospects, and they're fine just getting that salary relief, the financial relief there. But there's a Texas team that could send pieces. There is a Cubs team that could send pieces. You've got a Mets team. I mean, I know Mets fans, you want a starting pitcher. You could get one here. I don't know if you necessarily need one, but this would certainly improve the rotation. You've got a Blue Jays team that keeps checking in on all the top pitching that's out there and is still linked to Jack Flaherty. Is there a trade here for Michael King? Remember, it's 1 year Dylan Cease, 1 year Michael King. Do you want to go down that road? If you can part with pieces that are somewhat inconsequential, they are expendable, I think it's worth taking a look at. Could the Atlanta Braves step up for a trade here and improve their rotation? The Baltimore Orioles, if there's a team, two teams that really stand out to me that I would really like to see step up and make this trade, are the Orioles and the Tigers. I really feel like Michael King, if Flaherty's not coming back, King and Skubal and Olsen, look, you can go look at the Tigers rotation. You can justify leaving it as it is, but if you can get an upgrade, if you can get a trade done, I think you have to look at it. And as far as the Orioles go, again, I know you just did it with Corbin Burns. Here's the difference. Michael King is not represented by Scott Boras. Dylan Cease is, which may be why King is a more appealing trade piece here, because you could trade for Michael King and conceivably work out an extension. That's not going to happen with Dylan Cease. So the Orioles fans, maybe you're more interested in that one. Angels would also be a good one. But again, we're getting to a point in the season where this is all stuff you would have liked to have done a month or two ago, because every single one of these teams, all of them, can justify not making another move and continuing on into spring training with what they've got, which puts the Padres in a bad situation. Let's move on to some Dodgers talk next. And should Kike Hernandez be the top priority for the Dodgers as far as what their next move is going to be? On Dodgers Nation, Doug McCain had Buster Olney on, and Buster said that he believes that re-signing Kike Hernandez is incredibly important for the Dodgers. Talked about how long the season is, which gets to depth. I argue Kike Hernandez for, yes, the depth piece is nice, and the fact that he's a fan favorite is a bonus, but what he does, what he turns into in the postseason cannot be ignored, and therefore he needs to be brought back. Now, here's the thing. Should it be a top priority? Probably not, because there are two players out there that just feel like it's going to be Dodgers or bust, and it's Clayton Kershaw and Kike Hernandez. I can't see Kike at this point in his career going anywhere else. He tried that. Didn't really work that well. So it feels like he is a Dodger. And even if this thing is not resolved, they don't sign him or lock him up until March, I think that's the way this is going to go. What makes it complicated, and this whole scenario really magnifies the importance of trading Chris Taylor, in my opinion. Because if we're at this point, I would much rather have Kike Hernandez over Chris Taylor. But Chris Taylor's making a lot of money. And Chris Taylor has the versatility from a defensive perspective that Kike Hernandez has. You can put Kike in the infield and the outfield. You can do the same thing with Chris Taylor. But this is where the importance of trading Chris Taylor really steps up. Because when you look at the rest of this team, Rojas isn't going to go down. Rojas is going to be on the team. You can't put Andy Pages away. I think you need to leave him up at the major league level. Pages is in there, in my opinion. Pages, I know this is what Fangraphs has right now, will play a lot more than Michael Conforto will. They'll play the matchups. They'll play the hot streaks with Conforto, in my opinion. That's how it's going to end up playing out. Pages will get more opportunities. And as far as Rojas goes, again, versatile infield opportunities there. It's Chris Taylor or bust. So if we can find a trade partner for Chris Taylor, if we can work out something to remove him from the team, then I think Kike Hernandez signs a deal the next day. It becomes inevitable at that point that Kike Hernandez would be back. But as the current roster sits with money that is invested in options and all of that, the Dodgers are in a spot where someone's got to go. And if we're thinking about who's got to go, you got to effort a Chris Taylor trade to make room for Kike Hernandez. That's my opinion. Now or never is where I think we stand right now for Pete Alonso and Alex Bregman. We'll start with Pete Alonso. Everybody saw and heard the Steve Cohen comments over the weekend at the Mets Fan Fest. He's exhausted. This has not been an enjoyable experience, as most negotiations with Scott Boras are detailed. It's been difficult. And the New York Mets, after hearing that from the owner this past weekend, if you're the Toronto Blue Jays, now is the time to strike. If you have 3 on the table, put a 4th year. If 3's good, but you're at $20 million and he wants 25, throw the other $5 million on top of that. This is your time to strike if you're the Toronto Blue Jays. You've got to grab the pop. That's what this is about. There are a lot of people dogging Pete Alonso right now. A lot of Mets fans still dogging Pete Alonso, but that's more about the hiring of Scott Boras than I think it is Pete as a Met. There's a lot of frustrated fans with how that went down, but I'll say this from a Jays perspective, because we had the whole Angels meeting last week, or we heard of an Angels meeting last week. I don't see that happening. I don't see the Angels going down that road. Nolan Schanuel is their first baseman. Jorge Soler is their designated hitter. There's no room for Pete Alonso. And you can say, well, Schanuel doesn't have power, so he's not really an ideal prototypical first baseman. Pete Alonso would be that. You still have a really talented young player in Nolan Schanuel. What are you going to do with him? Are you going to slide him into the outfield after you sign Pete? Okay, well then, who's moving around when you do that? It just does not, it's not clean. If it's not clean, I can't put it towards a likelihood of a scenario that we see play out. So it's all about the Blue Jays here. Jays fans, many of them are ready to sign up for it. I'm in that group. To those that are not there, it's the power. It is the potential, and I hate to say it, but we're all thinking it. It's the potential Vladdy replacement a year in advance. They've already traded for Bo's replacement in Jimenez. Now you could be trading for Vladdy's replacement with Pete Alonso. I don't want that to be how this goes down, but it is an added benefit in the back of your mind if you can't get that extension done. Look, if we get to a point, the Blue Jays fans, if we get to a point where we cross that deadline that Vladdy imposed and there is no deal done and Pete's still a free agent, guess what? Pete's going to ask for more, because now all of a sudden the urgency from the Blue Jays will increase, because now Pete beyond 2025 becomes more important to the Toronto Blue Jays than maybe at this point on the calendar. If you're the Blue Jays, now's the time to strike. It doesn't sound like the waters are too warm between the Mets camp and Pete's camp. Jump on it. Let's go to, well, actually, let's before I go to the Bregman piece, this also applies to the Mets. So I got the Blue Jays on the thumbnail and I got the Blue Jays in the graphic behind here, but this also applies to the Mets, where it feels like it's now or never as well. The line is in the sand. It's now or never. Someone has the opportunity to strike. And if the New York Mets are going to get a Pete Alonso deal done, whether it is the Mets doing something or Pete's camp deciding, I want to be a Met, I'll accept their terms, now is what it feels like. If we don't hear about Pete Alonso signing back with the Mets in the next week or so, I think then it's probably done. I don't see it happening. Again, very clear from Steve Cohen over the weekend. So this is it's not necessarily this is the opportunity for the Mets to push. That's not really what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is, if it's going to happen for the Mets, it feels like it's now or never. And it's more about Boras and Pete's side caving. And if they don't now, I don't think they will at all. As far as Alex Bregman goes and the Houston Astros, it's now or never, in my opinion. As the offer we learned, this is an excerpt from an MLB.com article taking away Dana Brown's comments from this past Fan Fest in Houston on Saturday. The door was cracked open while admitting it was a long shot. Dana Brown acknowledged the team's continued interest in re-signing Bregman. The door was cracked while admitting it was a long shot. Bringing Bregman back could create payroll and positional challenges for the Astros, but they are prepared to pivot if he accepts the offer he was made late last year. That is where everything, as you have heard, we've all heard now that the offer's still on the table. Houston never pulled it. Now, The problem is that offer is technically, from an AAV perspective, it is reported that it is a pay cut, essentially. It is less than what he had been making. But if you're Alex Bregman, Houston is the one team that I think you make the exception for. If you're going to Boston, or you're going to Detroit, or you're going to Chicago, or you're going to Toronto, that is where you're going to... No, I have my demands. You must meet it. And after everything that has played out this offseason, if you take less, it isn't going to look very good. But in Houston, choosing above all else to return back and take that offer, he would be welcomed back as a hero with the Houston Astros. I think now's the time. Now's the time. The Presley trade, it has been reported that is not necessarily a step one to a few steps down the road that brings him back. It's sort of a coincidence that it's happening as all of this Bregman talk has sparked back up. But this is it. We're getting to a point where if you are Boston and you have truly had genuine interest, despite what's been reported and not reported and everything that's gone in all different directions, whether that, again, and that applies to Boston, that applies to Detroit, that applies to the Cubs, that applies to the Blue Jays, and it applies to Houston. Now's the time. If you are any of those four other teams and you hear that Houston is still in, and now Houston has opened up a little bit of money, now's the time for you to get serious about your offer if you're serious about Alex Bregman. And therefore, for Houston, it's time for you to get serious, because maybe these other four teams out of that group, somebody steps up and says, okay, you know what? I know we were reluctant, but here you go. Here's your $200 million, or here's your deal with opt-outs if that's where he's what he's favoring at this point. We've heard conflicting reports as to whether he would or wouldn't take a short-term deal. What do you think about Bregman? It feels like it's now or never to get this deal done. This is the second or third time we've come back to, can he get a deal done with the Houston Astros? And these other four teams, it applies to them too. As I was just saying, if you're Boston, Toronto, Detroit, Chicago, you hear that Houston is still in play, and they have the 6-year deal. 150 plus, that's about $160 million on the table. If you're not there, and you know that's on the table still from Houston. Word is there's at least one other 6-year offer on the table. Don't know who it's from. You got to step your game up if you want to get Alex Bregman, because it feels like we're finally getting close to the finish line with Alex Bregman, with this Houston thing resurfacing. I said it last week that the way it had gone with Boston and Detroit, and how Toronto sort of focused on Pete Alonso, that a team that we weren't expecting needed to be thrown back into the pot. And that was, a day or two before? I think it was one day before we heard about the Houston Astros resurfacing, that the offer was still on the table, that it was still a chance that he could go back to Houston. I'm all in on Houston. Boston, it's too crowded. The Detroit Tigers, same thing. It's gotten too crowded. The Toronto Blue Jays, the focus has to be on Pop. And again, I argue that the Blue Jays' left side of the infield is fine. They're also fine at second base. So what Alex Bregman brings to the table is not really it. They need a guy that can hit 40 home runs. They need a guy that can, that can play first base if Vladdy leaves. They need a guy that can play shortstop if Bo leaves. And that's not Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman is third base. Alex Bregman is potentially second base. Now, the Cubs do present an interesting play here, but that's really just if we get into a short-term contract situation. If they give him a high AAV, they give him the opt-outs, and that's what he's interested in. Would he do that over locking back in with Houston? It's getting close. It feels like it's getting close with all of the news, everything that's been put out there just over this past weekend. Both fan fests were this weekend, with Cohen blasting Boris and Pete, and Dana Brown telling us that the didn't tell us in direct words. He gave it to us here in this piece that they prepared to pivot if he accepts the offer that was made last year. Both pieces of information coming from FanFests over the weekend. How do you think it's going to play out? Comment down below. Is Bregman going back to Houston? That's just what it feels like to me at this point. I would be surprised. Look, I can be wrong. Been wrong plenty of times. This one feels like it's the direction we're heading. And as far as the Pete Alonso situation goes, if Boris and Pete cave, I think he goes back to the Mets. But that's why the Blue Jays need to jump, because they need to, if they really want him, give him reasons not to cave. Might be another year on the deal. Might be another $5 million on top of the AAV they have in front of them right now. I would like to see it get done. Again, comment down below. Let me know what you think, everybody, on any or all of these items that we have talked about in this one. That is going to do it for me tonight. I do appreciate you guys coming in and spending time, staying all the way to the end. Does amazing things for the algorithm, so I appreciate you for that. BALLCAP Nation, I salute you. Again, thank you for coming in and spending time with me here. Hit that like on the way out. And as always, if it's low, let it go. And if it's high, let it fly. I'll catch you next time.